The circle has been cast. Now let's begin.
Hello and welcome to the Spectral Circle podcast. My name is Mike, and before we begin episode 3, I'd like to thank everybody who downloaded and listened to the previous episodes of the Spectral Circle. I hope you are enjoying them, and I hope you continue to enjoy them far into the future as we go on this journey together. Now, if I could ask one little favour from everybody who listens, and that's please share this podcast with at least one person who you think or who you know is into the paranormal. That way, the word gets around, and that helps me a great deal. And as many of you know, there are many ways to listen to the Spectral Circle podcast. You can go to iTunes, Stitcher Radio, SoundCloud, Google+, Podbean, or YouTube. So just type in the Spectral Circle podcast, and it should just pop up, and you can access it that way and share it with people with ease. And if you're a new listener to the Spectral Circle podcast, I'd like to say welcome to the family, and I hope you enjoy listening to this podcast. And if you want to contact me here at the Spectral Circle podcast with any encounters, sightings or experiences, you can send either an email or a voicemail to thespectralcircle@gmail.com. I'll give the email address again at the end of the show with the rules to the voicemails. So with all that self-promotion out the way, let's get on to episode 3 of the Spectral Circle podcast. On this episode of the Spectral Circle, we are going to be talking about myths, lore and legends of the United Kingdom. This is going to be part 1 of the myths, lore and legends, as I will do other parts in the future down the line, and I will cover myths, lore and legends from around the world also. So I'm going to be reading about 4 stories about the lore, the myths, the legends here in the United Kingdom, and I've picked out a few that are known and a couple that are less known. So first up is the Chancebury Ring, which is an old prehistoric hill fort that sits atop of Chancebury Hill, located in the South Downs, which borders Hampshire, East Sussex and West Sussex. Now, as you know from previous episodes of the Spectral Circle podcast, Sussex is a very active place paranormally, and strange events are all happening there, such as the Black Shuck and other things like that. Now, this hill fort and the tree circle is said to be very, very old. It's said to date back to the Bronze Age or early Iron Age. Now, in 1987, a great storm destroyed a lot of the trees, which were the original trees which were grown there, the ones that made this circle around the fort. But after the great storm in 87, those trees were dug up, which were destroyed, and replaced with newer trees, recreating that circle, which still sits there today. So now let me tell you a little bit of the history of the tree fort and the hill, which is actually recorded in the history books. The hill fort is said to have been in use as far back as the 4th century BC, spanning through the Bronze Age and Iron Age, all the way up to when the Romans ruled Britain, and was abandoned when the Romans left the British Isles due to the constant barbarian and tribal ambushes and attacks and mutiny from the Roman-employed Saxons. The hill fort at Chancebury Hill was then left unoccupied for centuries until the 1940s, when World War II broke out, and was used as an anti-aircraft gun post. The constant military training exercises at the hill fort caused more damage to the remains of the old fort and the old structure. Now, after World War II, the military left the hill fort, and it remained that way until 1987, when the Great Storm broke out and the lightning damaged the original tree ring. It burnt the trees up. So somebody came along, planted new trees and recreated that tree ring around the fort. Now let's get into the legends of the Chancebury Hill and the Chancebury Ring and how it was created. So here's the legend of the Chanctonbury Ring. It has been passed down by word of mouth for centuries that Chanctonbury Ring, that sits atop of Chanctonbury Hill, was created by the devil, and if you wish, you can summon him, and this is how anybody willing to dare can do so. First you must run around the ring of trees 7 times anti-clockwise, and when the beast appears he will offer you a bowl of steaming hot soup, though the price you pay for this devilish broth is one's very soul. Though in different variations of the legend of the devil of Chanctonbury Hill and Chanctonbury Ring, the devil is said to either offer milk or porridge instead of the soup. The legend of the devil of Chanctonbury Hill is said to originate from the days when pagans worshipped at the fort. This was before and after the Roman ruling of Britain. There is also an interesting fact that the self-claimed and titled most wickedest man in the world, Aleister Crowley, and his associate Victor Newburgh lived just 2 miles from the Chanctonbury Hill and said that the Chanctonbury Ring was a great place of power. Newburgh published poems about the site, which included druids holding rituals and performing human sacrifices. So I'd like to actually try and get a hold of these poems. I've looked up on the internet and I could not find them anywhere. So I think I need to dig a bit more deeper and try to find the actual books that Newburgh wrote about this place. But on a lighter note, it is also said, if a female sleeps under the trees at the Chanctonbury Ring for 1 night only, your chances of falling pregnant will increase. So there, if you want to get pregnant, just go to Chanctonbury Hill, sleep under the Chanctonbury Ring, and you may fall pregnant. So there you have the legends of the Chanctonbury Hill and Chanctonbury Ring. So now we go into a place all too familiar, where the legends of the Black Shuck and the Hellhounds originate from, and that is Sussex, and to a place named Orford Castle. So, as I did with the previous story, I'll give you a little bit of history about Orford Castle. And here it is. The Orford Castle was built between 1165 by the King of England at the time, Henry II, and also served as barracks for 20 knights, who were actually fighting a revolt at the time against the barons of the land, who rose up against the king because of taxes and land ownership and whatnot. But they was all crushed, and by 1189 the King of England, Henry, died, and the importance of Orford Castle diminished. Now in 1216 the castle at Orford was captured by the future King of France, Prince Louis VIII, aka Louis the Lion, and Orford Castle was then sold from person to person numerous times, and by the 18th century the castle was in decay and started falling apart, much like the last fort I talked about, and it was also used as an anti-aircraft position during the Second World War. So let's get on to the legend of Orford Castle after that brief part of history that I've just told you about. So here is the legend or myth of Orford Castle. According to the records left by Ralph of Coggeshall, a monk and chronicler between the years 1187 and 1224, wrote, a naked wild man covered in hair was caught in the nets of local fishermen around the year 1167. The wild man was taken to Orford Castle and held in the dungeon for 6 months. The hairy wild man was tortured and questioned extensively, but never spoke one word in the whole time of its capture, and behaved like a feral dog, until one night the wild man escaped from the castle. In later tellings of the story of the wild man of Orford, it was changed to a merman because he was caught in the fishermen's nets. Now, many people have said they have seen hairy giant-like men wander in the area of Orford in Sussex, and castings have been made of large footprints from the area. So, this could be a kind of like the first encounter of a British Bigfoot, maybe a Sasquatch, like you get in North America and the Himalayas and stuff like that. Also, Scotland have a big reporting of Sasquatch in their areas because of the large forests. England may look small on the map, but we do have a lot of forested areas, especially the New Forest and stuff like that. It goes on for miles and miles and miles, hundreds of thousands of miles. So yeah, with like some Americans, they think Sasquatch could only be there. No, I reckon Sasquatch are a worldwide creature, you know. I reckon they are spread far afield, so you can have Sasquatch in any place. You know, you get the legends from, like, the Tibetan mountains and China, Thailand and stuff like that. Sasquatch could be everywhere. So there you have the legend of the Wild Man of Orford, the very first Bigfoot encounter in the UK. Well, that's what I think anyway, because they've got foot castings, it's meant to be a bigger foot than your average person. But it's been put down as a mermaid or a merman because it was caught in the waters. So I reckon it was fishing for some food, or got caught in a net or something. They dragged it up, they found it, stuck it in the dungeon, tortured it, questioned it, it escaped and went back into the wild. And people still seeing big hairy creatures around that area to this very day. So the next legend I'm going to be talking about is one that's pretty close to home for me. It's actually based in Lincoln, which is only an hour or so's train ride from me, and is also intertwined and interlinked with the town that I live in Grimsby. So this next legend is called the Lincoln Imp. So let's go to a place in Lincoln which held the title of the world's most tallest building for 238 years between the years 1311 and 1549. And that is the Cathedral Church of the Blessed Virgin Mary of Lincoln, or simply known as Lincoln Cathedral. Now, this is the only place on the list on this episode that I've actually visited a few times in person, many times as a kid on school field trips, and a couple of times as a young adult in my 20s. You know, I'm not a religious person, but I like looking at old buildings, you know. There is a beauty to, like, architecture and Gothic architecture. It's a really nice place to visit. If you get the chance to go to Lincoln and visit the cathedral or Lincoln Castle, it's a beautiful place. I love going to places like that. I've been to Scotland many a times to go to a few castles. I love visiting old places. There's that feeling you get inside when you visiting them. But anyway, enough of me babbling. Now let's get on to a brief history of Lincoln Cathedral. So the history of Lincoln Cathedral is very vast. It would take me a good few hours to actually get through everything. So I'm just going to give you the highlights on how the cathedral was built. Then we'll get into the legend of the Lincoln Imp. Bishop Remigius built the first cathedral on the very site it stands today, though it has been rebuilt due to a number of incidents. The Bishop Remigius finished building the original cathedral in 1092 and died the same year 2 days before the cathedral was consecrated. In 1141, the wooden timber roofing was destroyed in a fire, and the new bishop, Bishop Alexander, rebuilt and expanded the cathedral. And yet again, the cathedral was destroyed in another disaster, a natural one this time, by an earthquake of over 5 on the Richter scale. Yes, we do have earthquakes here in England. In 2008, I was awoken during the middle of the night by an earthquake of 5.2 here in Lincolnshire. It cracked a few house foundations, damaged a few ornaments off my shelves and whatnot. Yeah, so we do have earthquakes here in England. Let's get back into the story of the Lincoln Cathedral and the Lincoln Imp. So, after the earthquake, their new bishop took over and eventually became St. Hugh of Lincoln, who kicked the refurbishment and expansion and the rebuilding of the cathedral into high gear, and by 1210 the cathedral was now in its full Gothic glory, and 100 years later more reconstruction was underway. Yes, the cathedral is actually a huge building, and it started off small and grew bigger and bigger, and eventually the status of the cathedral made Lincoln a city. So there you have the city of Lincoln because of the cathedral, the size of the cathedral, drawing all these people to this one point of worship. A record was written to describe the architecture and the meaning of the newly installed stained glass windows, and the record is titled The Metrical Life of St. Hugh. And this refers to the meaning of these windows, one on the dark north side and one on the south light side of the building. And this is how the record goes. For the north represents the devil, and the south the Holy Spirit, and in these directions the two eyes look. The bishop faces the south in order to invite in, and the dean the north in order to shun. The one takes care to be saved, the other takes care not to perish. With these the eyes of the cathedral's faces on the watch for the candelabra of heaven and darkness of oblivion. So that's the metrical life of St. Hugh. That was the written record that was recorded. So we'll go on a bit into the future, a couple of decades further. In August of 1255, a body of an 8-year-old boy was found in a well in Lincoln. Now, the boy was missing for nearly a month before he was found in the well, and this incident became the source of a blood feud in the city between the Jewish community and the Christian community, and 18 Jews were hanged for this murder. And they dubbed the little boy Little St. Hugh of Lincoln, but he was never officially canonized. The cathedral benefited from the events because Hugh was seen as Little St. Hugh was dubbed a martyr of the cathedral. So let's now jump forward a little bit as the history of Lincoln Cathedral goes on and on for hundreds and hundreds of years, and I'm not going to cover it all on this podcast. So let's jump forward. The Lincoln Magna Carta, one of the original 4 copies of the Magna Carta, was held at Lincoln Cathedral for a few hundred years and was gifted to the United States of America in 1941. And in 2009, the Lincoln Magna Carta was lent to the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley, California. So that brings us to the present day. So let's take a look into the folklore and the myth and the legend that is the Lincoln Imp. Back in the 14th century, a legend began about 2 mischievous imps who were sent by Satan to do his evil bidding here on earth. The imps descended down on northern England and all across Lincolnshire and headed towards the Lincoln Cathedral. And when the 2 devilish imps reached the place of holy worship, they began to destroy everything in their path. They smashed the chairs, they smashed the tables, they smashed the pews, they even tripped over the bishop. And as the imps' destruction went on, out of a holy book of hymns an angel appeared and told them to stop. But one of the imps, in defiance, started throwing rocks and stone and rubble at the angel, and the other imp, too scared to do anything, cowered under the pile of broken tables and chairs. The angel, now angry at the defiant imp, turns it to stone where it resides to this very day. The mischievous imp that hid underneath the broken tables and chairs manages to escape and flee. And it is said the second imp makes its way across Lincolnshire, causing mayhem and destruction, finally entering Grimsby, my hometown, and makes its way into St. James's Church and causes more destruction and chaos by breaking furniture, chairs and tables like the first imp. Then the same angel reappears, thrashes the buttocks of the second imp and turns it to stone, and in St. James's Church you can still see the statue of the second imp holding its buttocks as if it's just been thrashed. So there you have the legend of the Grimsby and the Lincoln Imp, well, collectively just known as the Lincoln Imp. So the next one I'm going to do is one from Durham, and this will be the last one before I end this episode. So it's another short episode until things pick up and I find my bearings, so to speak. So this next legend is one of my all-time favourites, as it involves fantasy elements, and I love fantasy stuff, Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that. Yes, I am a geek. But anyway, yeah, let's go to Durham, which is the far northeast of England. And this one actually reads more like a story because it's folklore, it's myth. It's a tale that's been passed down through generations. It is simply known as the Lambton Worm or the Lambton Wirram. A man known as John Lambton, here of the Lambton estate, was setting up his fishing equipment while he was meant to be at church, when an old witch approached him and warned him, no good will come from missing church. John Lambton ignores the warning and continues to fish, but catches nothing until the time of the church services would be finishing, and that's when he gets a bite and pulls something in. He notices he has caught a weird eel-like creature with 9 holes on the side of its head, looking much like a salamander. John then declares to the old witch that he has caught the devil and throws it down a nearby well. The witch warns John about the beast, but John ignores her and forgets about it. Years pass and the creature becomes large and poisonous, and the villagers start to notice livestock and animals are going missing, and one day discover a giant-like snake worm creature has wrapped itself around a local hill, where Penshaw Monument actually stands to this day. The old worm becomes more aggressive and starts terrorizing the villagers, and starts eating sheep and small children. On a rampage, the beast heads towards the Lambton's castle. Confronting the snake-like monster is John's father, the lord of the castle, and battles the Colossus worm. Eventually he manages to sedate it and bargains with the worm by offering it a daily tribute of milk of 9 good cows. That's roughly around 20 gallons of milk. Now some of the villagers grow brave and angry and decide they want to slay the beast, and are all killed trying. Knights hear of the so-called serpent and try their hands at slaying the dragon, but all fall short and die as the beast coils its body around a thick tree stump and uses it like a club to break their armour and bodies. 7 long years pass under the worm's constant threat, and John returns from the Crusades weary, only to find the Lambton estate in shambles and empty because of the dragon's long reign of terror. John wants revenge and wants to take up arms against the monster, and eventually seeks out the old witch's advice. The old witch tries to talk John out of it because it is his fault the worm grew and became bitter, but eventually gives him counsel in the fight against the creature. She tells him to cover his entire armour in sharp spearheads and fight the worm in the river, where the place of the old dragon has now retired and wrapped itself around a large rock. The witch then tells John upon killing the serpent he must kill the first thing he sees, or his family will be cursed for 9 whole generations, and they will not die peacefully in their beds. John goes about and prepares his armour, and then goes to his father, who is now back in the estate, and tells him, "After I slay the beast, I will sound the hunting horn 3 times, and upon hearing this signal you must release my favourite hound, so that it shall run to me, and I shall kill it to avoid the curse taking hold." John then sets off to slay the dragon, and an epic battle then pursues. They fight hard and violently. Eventually the creature coils its long serpent body around John Lambton and squeezes, but the spearhead armour cuts the old beast to pieces and ribbons, and chunks of it sink to the bottom of the river. Exhausted and weary from battle and defeating the great beast, John triumphantly blows on his hunting horn 3 times. On hearing the hunting horn, John's father is overly excited and rushes out to congratulate his son on defeating and slaying the dragon. John then turns to see his father rushing towards him, but ignoring the witch's guidelines, he cannot bring himself to kill his own father. John then tells his father to go back to the castle and release his favourite hound. As he does, the dog rushes towards John, and John kills it. Failing to follow the witch's request, the curse takes hold. So there you have the legend of the Lambton worm. The Lambton family did actually own that land in Durham, so who knows, the myth could actually be true. If dragons did exist, I do not know. Generations of the Lambton family did die not in their bed peacefully. The first generation, Robert Lambton, drowned in Newrig. Second, Sir William Lambton, died or was killed at Marston Moor. The third generation, William Lambton, died in battle in Wakefield. The 9th generation, Henry Lambton, died in a carriage crossing Lambton Bridge on June 26th in 1761. General Lambton, Henry Lambton's brother, is said to have kept a horsewhip by his bedside to ward off violent assaults. He died in his bed of old age, so that's where the curse got broken. So there you have some myths, lore and legends from the United Kingdom. Like I said, I will do more episodes like this in the future and probably explore some myths, lore and legends from around the world and revisit the UK ones, because I want to do stuff like Spring Heel Jack and cases like that, more well-known cases. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'm sorry it's a short one, and I hopefully will get the next episode out sooner rather than later, because this one took 2 weeks because I've been working a lot. I worked 72 hours this and last week. So yeah, that's why I've not been able to get this episode out a lot sooner. So the next episode I'm going to do on the Spectral Circle podcast is UFO incidents of the United Kingdom. So if you want to contact me here at the Spectral Circle, you can do so at the Spectral Circle spectralcircle@gmail.com. That's thespectralcircle@gmail.com. You can send me emails or voicemails about any sightings you've had, any experiences you've had. Voicemails, there are a few rules. Keep it 10 minutes or under. No political talk. No swearing. And please keep religious talk to a minimum, because I want everybody from all backgrounds to enjoy this podcast. And I will also read your emails out and play your voicemails on the show. It would be good if I could get some UFO sightings or UFO reports in from the United Kingdom, voicemail wise or email wise. Just say from a week from today's date, which is the 5th of April 2017. So that's the 13th of April 2017. If you can get any reports in or voicemails or anything like that by that date, I'll play them or read them on the next show. Also, if you want to follow me on Twitter to keep up to date about the Spectral Circle podcast, just type in @SpectralCircle on Twitter. If you listen via iTunes, please rate and review, as that helps. Same goes for the YouTube. Please share, like, and subscribe the videos and to the channel. Also, across all the other platforms that I mentioned at the beginning of the show, if you like, share, subscribe, that will help. So this is me, Mike, from the Spectral Circle podcast, saying goodbye, and I hope you have a good week. Goodbye.
The circle is now closed.